As the nation paused to say farewell to the 41st president, the 45th threatens a government shutdown if denied billions for the wall. Will energized Democrats dig in, or can compromise be reached for the good of the country? Elsewhere in the nation's capital, the Mueller probe approaches critical mass. Will Donald Trump face criminal indictment for obstruction and busting election laws? Here in Texas, the state launches legal warfare against a so-called sanctuary city. Will the crackdown on San Antonio force other jurisdictions to follow the law? And in the Bayou City, a Catholic church faces crisis. Will an ongoing investigation reveal decades of secret abuse and cover-up? I'm Greg Grugan, and welcome to What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, Republican strategist Jessica Colon. Next up, progressive commentator and attorney Nyanza Moore. In the 3 spot, Bob Price, associate editor of Breitbart, Texas. Batting cleanup, super neighborhood leader Tomaro Bell. Next up, businessman, columnist, and former Kemah Mayor Bill King. And closing us out on the hot corner, Chicano activist and educator Tony Diaz. Let's do this. A bona fide showdown in the nation's capital is looming over funding for the border wall. President Donald J. Trump says if Congress doesn't approve $5 billion to pay for construction of the barrier, he's willing to force a government shutdown. While Democratic Minority Leader and future House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called the wall, quote, immoral, ineffective, and expensive, she appears willing to appropriate more than $1.5 billion for what she calls fencing. The White House is countered by accusing Democrats of preferring a shutdown to bricks and mortar protection of Border Patrol agents and improving national security. Question now, who, if anyone, will blink? I'm going to go to you, Nyanza.
Well, I'm just happy to see Nancy at the lead, but I agree with her wholeheartedly. The $1.9 billion that they're using, if they want to use that money to go ahead and enforce the current protections that we already have, that's great. We don't need $5 billion. I thought Mexico, all that I've heard from the last 2 years was Mexico was going to pay for the wall, not the taxpayers of the United States. If we cannot find enough money to fund our own protection on this side of the border, why do we need $5 billion? I'll say it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck. It is a duck because we're not going to pay for that.
Bob Price, been waiting for you to get back.
Bob.
We missed him.
I'll tell you what's immoral, Nancy Pelosi, is 370 people being allowed to die along that border because we don't have the willpower to secure this border. They die inhumane deaths at the hands of callous human smugglers who exploit weaknesses in our border security. That needs to stop. And the border wall has proven itself time and time again to be effective in stopping and reducing the number of people crossing the border.
Lieutenant Commander Dan Crenshaw has said barriers matter. Tony, you think this $5 billion the president is demanding is money that he's not going to get and shouldn't get?
No, and I already think the voters have seen through this con. They didn't believe it when Trump was trying to get people scared about poor families coming thousands of miles to play the American Hunger Games for jobs. Because really, evidently, one, I guess our enemies across the world should not fear our Border Patrol or Army because they can't stop a bunch of poor families who are starving and tired. They can't stop them. Of course they can if they wanted to. Trump just wanted to put on a show. On top of it, I also know that all the workers who survived the American Hunger Games, who get through the system, they're going to wind up being the best employees at dairy farms, meat packing industries.
Trump Hotel.
Trump Hotel, as was revealed recently. So why lie about it? On top of it, these are old tricks. You know what's going to happen? They're not going to budge because Pelosi has got a new team behind her. Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. They're not going to let her back down to Trump's bullying. Right. So it's about time we really sit down and have serious talks about really fixing immigration.
Okay, Jessica, $5 billion within the context of this multi-trillion-dollar budget is really not that much.
No.
However, is it worth shutting the government down?
There's a bill on the table for $25 billion, and I think we need to take our border security seriously. And this is a very popular issue across the country, and this is why you're starting to hear Nancy Pelosi backwalk what she's going to call it. Now she's calling it fencing. The second that she has the votes she needs, because she's still recruiting votes to be Speaker of the House, Second she has those votes, she's going to start to come to the table on this. And that's what it's going to take, is the Democrats coming to the table on if we're going to secure this border. As far as Tony's point, if our Border Patrol, it's not fair to mock them. They are being killed, like Bob was saying, simply with rocks.
They have Army support. No, don't say my name. Don't say my name and call me out and lie. You're lying. You are lying about that.
I'm not lying.
You're lying.
It's actually reported that that's been happening. And the bottom line here is that Schumer and Pelosi have a meeting with the president on Tuesday. And so we'll see exactly how they're going to lay this out. But this is an incremental step in the right direction. And that's what's going to happen, is incrementally. And this is actually, this $1.6 billion that we're talking about that's already been approved for funding does fund new pieces of the border security and the border wall and the border in California and in Texas.
Bill King, okay. Yeah. Bill King, how does this showdown end?
I'm not sure how it ends, because we have two political parties that don't want a solution, they want a controversy. The polling shows that the American people overwhelmingly are in favor of border security. They're also overwhelmingly in favor of comprehensive immigration reform and some solution for the DACA kids. The problem is these two parties keep playing to their bases, and I'm not sure who that helps the most in this case. I suspect it helps the Democrats the most, because the person who's seen as shutting down the government normally suffers the political consequences.
Okay, I'm coming to tomorrow next, but we're moving to another topic. Meantime, we're getting more details about the Mueller investigation. The president's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, has been convicted of 4 federal crimes and will be facing jail time. And the law breaking may not have stopped after the election. Speaking in Houston this week, former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says the legal line was thin while he was in the White House.
We did not have a common value system. When the president would say, well, here's what I want to do, and here's how I want to do it. And I'd have to say to him, well, Mr. President, I understand what you want to do, but you can't do it that way. It violates the law. It violates a treaty.
All of this as the president prepares to fire his second chief of staff, General John Kelly, while nominating former Attorney General William Barr to replace Jeff Sessions as the nation's top law enforcement officer. It is no surprise Barr has been highly critical of the Mueller investigation, a probe now into its 18th month. Your take, Tomaro Bell.
It's amazing how these two ideas are connected, the first one and the second one, because for Trump, it's about one thing and one thing only: welfare for the wealthy. A $5 billion contract or a $25 billion contract, we know who that's going to. He came in there to pillage and plunder and get as much profit as he can in that position, and that's what his mission is. That's why Tillerson would say, you can't do this, nope, you can't do this. I mean, I know he felt like Forrest Gump, you can't sit here, you can't sit here. And so he's like, okay, if I can't sit here, I can sit, then you gotta go.
Okay, Bob Price, we talked about this earlier. You know, look, I'm not a lawyer, but when you're listed as a co-conspirator of a guy who's been convicted, that could mean trouble, particularly with the democratically controlled House of Representatives.
People plead guilty to things all the time. It doesn't mean that it was a crime, and it doesn't mean that anyone else was connected to it. So we'll see what they come out with. But as far as the selection of Mr. Barr to be the Attorney General, former Attorney General Barr, I think that's a great choice. He has no connection to the campaign. He has no connection to the Russia so-called collusion. So, and he has a very strong record on enforcement of border security laws, and I welcome him to that position.
Okay, Counselor Nyanza Moore.
Yeah, I think that, you know, when you have co-conspiracy, there has to be more than one person acting. So if you have a co-conspirator, more than likely there is a felony committed. If one person confesses to the conspiracy, the person, even though we know that it was redacted, we know that the only person that could conspire to do any campaign fraud, which is a felony, that's the concern here. Forget about the Russia collusion. Let's talk about the campaign finance fraud. When Michael Cohen agreed and said to the government that, you know what, we did some things illegally with campaign finance. That felony could cause for impeachment. They can say the collusion, maybe having Russia's not a big deal, but campaign finance is a huge thing. We've got lots of fraud, we've got lots of money covering up, we've got lots of tax evasion, but in this instance, when you have your consigliere that you always wanted confessing to conspiracy, he's not conspiring with the younger Trump. He's conspiring the person who's going to be the president. And I think right now, we don't have to be concerned so much about what's going on in the news media when it relates to Michael Cohen, because what we know is this: he made a deal with the government. It may have been a little bit too late for him to be able to go ahead and not have a sentencing. He wasn't as good as giving up the information as Michael Flynn. But at the end of the day, Michael Flynn may be our Russia target, but Michael Cohen is definitely the co-conspirator when it comes to fraud in campaign finance, and that is something that will get you impeached.
Jessica Colon, are Republicans concerned that this president may be in serious trouble?
Well, we're still talking about the same thing we were talking about a year and a half ago, and there still isn't, you know, a whole thing all across these 18 months has discovered these other issues. It has not yet revealed or discovered the crux of the matter, which is that there was determined and intentional collusion. And at this point, it feels that there's grasping at straws. They've discovered other things, but they haven't been connected to what the original intent of this investigation was. And regarding Tillerson's remarks, you know, he advised the president that he couldn't do such things. He never said that they did those things. So I think it's important that words matter. And when you're listening to the news, like, listen to what people are saying and not what the conclusions then they're extrapolating from remarks that were made.
Our conversation is certain to continue. Okay, when we return, San Antonio now squarely in the gun sights of the Texas Attorney General for breaking the sanctuary city law. A discussion certain to be lively when we come back.